What I'd like to start with this afternoon is to show, not just myself but all of us as speakers, to show probably the greatest tragedy of Monsanto's type of agriculture. The amount of people who have died, been poisoned, ecocide, is there is absolutely no need. We can nourish the world, we can nourish two worlds with the right type of agriculture. So this section is for us to leave on a positive note and actually to change the future to the one we want. On the screen now I've got the most important equation or chemical reaction in the known universe. And what it does, it gets 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, 6 molecules of water, uses sunlight, solar energy, this is solar powered, and it produces glucose, and the byproduct is oxygen in our atmosphere. That one molecule, the sugar, is the basic powerhouse for most living organisms. Our mitochondria burn that, that's how we get energy. You can modify that slightly and turn it into a carbohydrate. That's where we have our starches, rice, wheat, potatoes. Change it in a little bit again and we make hydrocarbons. That's oils, fats, butter. It's also what we're running on is fossilized hydrocarbons, fossilized sunlight. You can add a little bit of nitrogen or a little bit of sulfur to it and you make amino acids. That makes our DNA, our proteins, our hormones. So this is the basic molecule of life. And when we're farming, what we want to do is maximize how we collect this solar energy and use solar energy to power all our ecosystem services. It is very important for putting organic matter, taking the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and put it into the soil. And so I'd like to give you an example of what that means for climate change. This is research done by the Rodale Institute in Pennsylvania, where they looked at adding compost to organic fields, and without going to the maths, but if you extrapolate that across to agriculture, we could reverse climate change in 24 years by scaling up agriculture. Instead of having toxic inputs, we use solar energy, put carbon into the soil, increase fertility, and there's other things that we can use it for. Probably one of the most important is for our food security, because at the moment, everywhere around the world, we're facing climate change. We're seeing more storms, more droughts. These big events that used to happen once in every 30 years are now happening 1 in every 5 years. We have to make agriculture resilient to these adverse events, otherwise we starve. And we have very good science showing that our organic systems do get higher yields than conventional in these adverse weather conditions. This is to give you an example of it. This is a field trial after 16 years in Switzerland. Same soil, one has built up their organic carbon, taken the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and put it into the soil. The other one has progressively lost carbon out of the soil and turned it into carbon dioxide into a greenhouse gas. When it rains, you can see the organic soil keeps its integrity. It absorbs water. The conventional soil erodes away, it goes into the creeks and rivers as pollution, becomes algae blooms, dead areas. If we go further into this, you have a look at why it starts to happen. You look at the science. If you look at, there's 2 bottles there. One is the organic soil, the other one is the conventional. The organic soil keeps its integrity and absorbs water. Conventional collapses and erodes. If you go further into the science, I'll show you one of the main reasons. This is humus, one of the important fractions of organic matter. If you look at it, it is a sponge. That gives it an ability to absorb up to 30 times its own weight in water. It's also a polymer, it's a glue, holds the soil together. That's why the organic soil didn't collapse when it rained or when it's put in the water. The other really important thing here I want to show you is when we increase organic matter, we can increase the storage of water at our root zone. If you look, most soils, Africa, Asia, and my country, they're 1% or less. That means when it rains, you can capture about 160,000 litres in the root zone per hectare. Any extra rain runs off as runoff. We start getting soils up to 5 or 6%, and I put 6% there because I did that in 11 years in my own farm. We can start storing about a megalitre a hectare. What that means is rather than building all these big megalitre dams and building all these canals, we can store water where we want it, at the root zone. In other farms, that just runs off as pollution. The advantage of that is that when we come into drought times, the organic fields are much better at performing because they've got the water. So you have a look there, this is a drought in 1995 in Pennsylvania. It's the same soil. One is an organic one, it's about 16 years into the experiment. And you can see the organic corn is not suffering, the conventional corn is. They're only about a metre apart. Same soil, it's the treatment, the growing treatment. Professor David Pimentel and colleagues from Cornell University did a peer review on this and found on average in these drought times, organic gets about 30% more than conventional. We actually have a lot of science now showing that organic can get higher yields than conventional. This is work done in the United States where organic systems are getting higher yields than conventional. I think probably the most important is when we look at the majority of farmers in the world. They are smallholders. And what we have learnt now is that we can double their yields by teaching them good organic techniques. This is a review done by 2 United Nations organisations into organic projects in sub-Saharan Africa. It's done by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNTAD, and the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP. It looked at 144 projects in 24 African countries, covering 2 million hectares and about 1.9 million farmers. And what they found is, on average, there was a 116% increase in yield. This is really important because when we look at who the hungry are, they're mostly smallholder farmers. The industrial model has failed them. It doesn't matter how much corn you grow in Kansas or in Australia, these people will never get it because they don't have the money to buy for it. That's the trouble with a market-based system. The key is food sovereignty, to grow the food where they are, and you can feed them. The last thing I want to end on is how we can improve it. The model of industrial agriculture is you buy all the inputs, toxic inputs to use them. What we're trying to do is bring in an agroecological approach. So we work with the ecological and biological sciences. In this case, instead of using pesticides, we bring in functional biodiversity, the host plants of this insects that will attack our pests. You change the ecology to one which these insects need. All of them, or I shouldn't say all of them, most of them actually need to have flowers in their life cycle. They need the pollen and nectar to successfully reproduce. So by putting these flowering plants in, we can bring these beneficials that will eat our pests. And the best example for me is push-pull. And Hans Herren, he was the director of CP and was in charge of this particular program, where by using the ecological science, you can increase yields. Corn is the most important crop in the world. It's the major crop in Africa, it's the major crop in the Americas, and in Asia it is the second crop after rice. Everywhere where corn is grown, you get stem borers, the moths that eat in, and in Africa they actually get a very bad parasitic weed called striga. Instead of putting out more pesticides and herbicides, or genetically modifying it so it puts out its own pesticides, they wanted to work with nature. So, let's see if I can use the pointer. I don't know which is the best one with 2 of them. But what they did is find plants that have got what we call eco-functions. So this particular plant, Desmodium, does two things. It gives off volatile compounds that will repel the moth. At the same time, it actually brings in the natural enemies of the moth, so any that aren't repelled are actually eaten. Then on the side here, they've put what we call a trap crop. It's a crop that the moth will also lay its eggs in. But these trap crops have their own defences. In the case of this one, it has this napier grass that has a sticky exudate, so when the caterpillar eggs hatch, they get caught up in the sticky exudate, and most grasses have fine silica hairs that actually cut up the caterpillars. So what it means is they break the breeding cycle. The other thing that Desmodium does, it puts out a range of compounds that cause the suicidal germination of weeds, while at the same time giving free nitrogen to the corn. You don't need to use nitrogen fertiliser. So this, to give you an idea here, if you have a look at the difference, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out which one of these will give you a higher yield. But look at what the Desmodium does in the corn there. It stops both the moth and this weed here, striga. It's a beautiful looking weed, except for if you're a farmer. It's a parasite. So that's when scientists have worked on it. What happens now is that farmers then look at it and start to innovate. And they said, look, if it works on corn, does it work on millet? Does it work on sorghum? Yes, it did. Then they said, will it work on tomatoes? Will it work on other crops? And yes, it does. These are mangoes in Ethiopia. And here is chilies. You can basically adapt these systems to any crop and get high yields without using toxic pesticides. The real disaster happening on this planet, it doesn't even make a paragraph on page 4. At the moment in Africa, there are 40 million people who are food insecure because their crops have failed due to the worst drought in 100 years. It's for those of us who are old enough to remember the Live Aid concerts in the 80s, when there was a big drought in Ethiopia. This drought is worse. This is what Ethiopia looked like in 30 years ago, and most of this damage and crop failure is due to poor land use. One of our members worked with the local people in Ethiopia as in partnership and started working at landscape level and community level, started rehabilitating the fields, putting things like legumes to grow, that can be high protein crops, but gives free nitrogen, builds up soil fertility. They rehabilitated gullies, made ponds so they could have water and fish. They planted a whole range of legume trees and other vegetation that could be used for attracting beneficial insects, windbreaks. And then they could get this biomass and turn it into compost and actually into biogas, so they could actually do their cooking, have lights at night without having to chop down trees, and then use compost, the biogas slurry, and they would put that out in the field. So what I want to end on is this. This is very good work done by Dr. Sue Edwards, published by FAO. It is the mean for 900 samples from farmers over 7 years. The smallest bar here is the traditional system. The other bar on the other side is where chemical fertilisers are used, but the green bar is where compost is used. And you can see in every case that the organic, the composted system got higher yields. The farmers quickly worked out that compost costs you nothing. It's just a family time, opportunity cost, where they had to borrow money for these chemical inputs, but they got a lower yield. So quickly, most of the farmers turned over to compost. This actually changed an era where people died from lack of food into a prosperous community. You can go there and you can see that area because it's green, and you can see the other areas nearby. It was they can afford to send the children to school, especially the girls to school, because if they've only got a little bit of money, it'll always be the boys. The girls miss out. They can afford food, transport. It's just revitalised the community. Because Ethiopia is in a drought at the moment, I wanted to know how they were going. So I contacted Dr. Sue Edwards. I said, how are they going? She said, they're fine. They aren't suffering like the other areas. Eventually she came back to me and she sent me a report that they're using where they were scaling up the push-pull. Go back, wrong way. So this is push-pull experiments in Ethiopia. And I got this report and they said, the authors, the researchers said, we're a bit disappointed. We got yield increases, but they weren't as big as we expected them because of the drought. And I looked at that and said, that's incredible. Elsewhere in Ethiopia, Zambia, Malawi, crops have failed. People are now reliant on the World Food Programme. There's 40 million people. In the middle of this drought, the worst drought in 100 years in Africa, they get a yield increase. That shows that these systems are resilient to climate change, they are high yielding, and this is the future that we want, not the toxic one. Thank you.
This last panel here is called People's Visions and Actions for the Future of Food and the Planet. The first thing is I'm in the mood to stand up. In the double sense of the word. To get off this chairs and really to stand up my own to do something. So what is in my head? What are my ideas? Let me first remember you to the anti-nuclear movement. I'll explain you why. You see, can you remember the anti-nuclear movement had one sign, this yellow-red sun. Some did the sun like this, some did only with some stars. And there was written, nuclear power, no thanks, in I think 100 languages. And whenever I went with this sign or bottom on my jacket, on my backpack, or whatever, people came and said, oh, you are one of us, or I'm one of yours. So we knew we are a movement. And okay, this movement until now has good reason to be busy. In Germany we succeeded saying that the last nuclear power plant will be shut down in about 2020. And now we don't have less than the idea to bring Germany on a level of 100% renewable energy, and we will not stop there. We go on to a European Union of 100% renewable energy. And it all started which means it all started with nuclear power, no thanks. With this nice and polite no. And I come again to this issue at the end of my little speech here. I just wanted you to remember this, and now let us look, where are we on the food question? When we say no thanks, we don't want to eat Monsanto food. We don't want to eat meat where the animals are fed with Monsanto feed. We don't want to eat poisoned food. We don't want our food to be produced in soil that is really killed during the process. Isn't it the same? Or shouldn't we think about this anti-nuclear movement to learn a bit for a food movement? You see, there is a food movement that is bigger than we can imagine, or is bigger than we have ever seen. Just remember a few little points. About 30 years ago, McDonald's tried to open a McDonald's shop at the Spanish Steps in Rome. And then there were some people saying, no, we want Italian cuisine, which is the best of the world, maybe. And they say, we don't want fast food at the Spanish Steps in the middle of Rome. So they said, we found the contrary, slow food. Which combines good food, regional food, seasonal food, and people that prepare food, and that you look at the people dealing, producing and working with this food. It's a movement of slow food, and it's a movement of a lot of respect. But there are a lot of others. Environmental groups. In former times they just looked at direct environmental things. Now they say protection of the environment and biodiversity is also a question of food. How is our food produced? What is the result for the soil, for the people's health, for biodiversity, and for the climate, for example? All over the world are environmental groups, or all over the world are demonstrations. In Berlin, for example, we have a so-called, in every January, a so-called International Green Week, which is not green, it's about chemicals and mass production. But since years we do have a demonstration saying we are fed up. We are fed up with the way you produce so-called food. This is not food. 30,000, 35,000 one year in a cold, very cold January day in Berlin, we had 50,000 people on the street saying we are fed up and we want our food to produce in a different way. Why do I say it? To show you that there is a big and huge potential for a food movement. You all, the scientists, the farmers, the environmental movement, we are bigger than we ever thought. And this is why my result of this food assembly and Untitled Chapter is to recognize that we are in a situation where we can say, no, we are strong and we are a lot in this. And the question is now how we do it. What are our tools to manage with? I want to give you an idea, or I could say two little ideas for the situation now. The first thing is, let us talk about our rights. The right of safe food. And why do I say let us talk about rights? Maybe people say this is not too emotional, but okay, I'm a lawyer also, you see. I have to deal somehow with paragraphs. So I'm looking at paragraphs and rights. There is not only the right of big enterprises to own money with their chemicals and seeds or whatever, or with their land. There is also a right of the people to save food. Food that is safe at the end of the product, also food that is safely produced and does not harm the soil or the health of people in the production process. You see, and this is not only my idea, it's also the idea of the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization did a definition about health. And they don't say health is the contrary of illness. They say health is a healthy environment. You see the difference? Because they do not only talk about the illnesses that are already there or are absent, they say working for health means produce a healthy environment so that you can better be cured or that you do not even get the next illness. And healthy environment is what? Healthy city, healthy water, healthy soil, healthy air, healthy food. So from this WHO definition of health, which is a healthy environment, my definition comes, we have the right to save food in the production process, and at the very end, what do we get? And saying this, they cannot get us and say, but we have the right to produce and have profits. We say, maybe, but we also have rights. We look at each other. We also are a group of persons having rights. And this is why I'm going on this rights-based approach, because I think that they normally try to get us really on the other side, dealing with their problems and not with our rights. To know, today we all know, that the way our food is produced is an ecocide. I don't have to explain, because this was the issue of the days we had there in Den Haag. My conclusion is, there is a right. The first point is, there is a right to save food, and just be impressed of ourselves and go with this right-based approach. And the other point is, let's build up alliances. Because we as a food movement can, you remember this red, yellow button, nuclear power, no thanks, worldwide no, why don't we say, we don't eat your food, no thanks, or no thanks to bad food, unhealthy food. We can say, no, yes, we want healthy food, but this, as the necessity of this to be a big and strong food movement is that we build up alliances. And you see, it's not only us here, it's really saying that the farmers' movement, that the human rights movement, that the people in the developing or least developed countries, that the environmental group, that the slow food people, that the gourmets, and however they are all called, put themselves together and decide something like no thanks, nuclear power, no thanks, and the other way around, we will only eat safe food. And believe me, if we all go by this opinion, we'll be stronger than we think today. Thank you.
Well, thank you to everyone here, and thank you to the people all over the world, because I think there's 600 cities and towns today that are doing events in solidarity with what we're doing here. So, we've been watching some of the web traffic and social media traffic in a number of languages, and a lot of people are paying attention. So I think we want to come out of this conference. I think there's two things. The first one is this notion of regeneration. I mean, I think we all agree that we're living in a degenerate society, a degenerate world, where we have degenerated the soil, we've degenerated public health, we've degenerated public morality, you know, where things like war and violence have become the norm. You know, we have degenerated the economies of the world. Half the world is, you know, barely making it. The other half are you know, bored to death with their jobs and their money and their commodity cultures and so on. So I think we all agree we need to move away from this degeneration. We actually, all the climate scientists and soil scientists are telling us, you know, we got about 25 years left. That's it. That's it. 25 years. And let's regenerate. All right. So how do we do this? Well, I think the first thing is we need to globalize hope. You know? And what I mean by this is let's stop talking gloom and doom and start talking about how we can solve every single one of these problems. You know, it's like, yeah, we're putting up 10 billion tons of carbon every year into the atmosphere, and then the oceans suck up a couple of billion tons of that, and it's oversaturated the oceans, and even our degenerated soils and forests are sucking up about another billion tons. But we're ending up with about 6.5 billion tons extra of carbon up in the atmosphere. And we're very close to the point of no return. Okay, unless we regenerate. We're going to get to zero fossil fuel economy in the European Union and the world by 2050. I think it's quite feasible. But we still have to suck down 250 billion tons of carbon over the next 25 years that we've put up there. And the only way we're going to do it is to change the way people eat, change the way people farm, change our relationship to the forests and the wetlands and the animals and to one another. You know, so let's get on with it. These old terms of world revolution and grassroots uprisings, it's time to start talking about those again, because that's our only hope. And we got to break down the walls that divide us. You know, I believe that's the major obstacle to regenerating the global grassroots movement, to building a movement of several billion farmers and several billion conscious consumers to change the world. We can't keep having just battles in various countries. We've got to have transnational communications, cooperations, campaigns. Like I mentioned yesterday, the people of Europe have got to rise up and stop this genetically engineered animal feed coming from South America up here. You know, we have to express our solidarity with the people in South America. And of course, this extends to China. That's 80% of this GMO animal feed is going to China. And I was so glad to see the sister yesterday from Beijing University pull out some of the great slogans from Chairman Mao and these great concepts. Because if we don't build solidarity with the grassroots of China, India, Iran, Africa, Latin America, we're going to lose. Okay? We speak a lot of different languages, but we can get over that now. Okay. And we can't have a forest movement over here, an ocean movement over here, an anti-GMO movement over here, an organic movement over here, an urban agriculture movement over here, an anti-war movement over here, an economic justice movement over here. We're in 1,000 different silos, even in our own countries, and we're divided by national borders. Let's break this down. Let's come out of this like, I hope you hear from me. I hope I hear from you about how we're going to cooperate to bring this degenerate system down and build the new system that we need. So globalizing hope is our first order of business. If it sounds like a difficult task to suck down all that excess carbon and refertilize our soils, recarbonize our soils, rehydrate our soils, you know, I mean, we've got 12 billion acres of farmland and rangeland in the world. We've got 5 to 10% of the farmers and ranchers already doing things basically the right way, whether they're certified organic or not, if they're farming according to organic principles. And there's plenty of evidence that farmers can add half a ton up to a couple of tons of carbon per year into their soils and keep it there. But it's going to take the cooperation of consumers. We got to stop buying the stuff, you know, that is degenerating our health in the soils. And the farmers have to stop growing it. And believe me, they will stop growing it if there's no market for poison food. We jerk the market out from under them and we pay them a fair price. They will start to do things the same way. Farmers can teach other farmers, you know, if we will help them. There's people in every country in the world doing things in a regenerative way. So let's embark on this journey together and get very serious about it. Let's be very strategic in our thinking, and especially I want to make a plea. We need to start doing transnational grassroots campaigns that involve consumers and farmers together. You know? And we need to be very strategic. These industries we're trying to bring down, they have points, Achilles heel, if you will, where they're very, very vulnerable. We have to find those points, you know, and start with that. Thank you very much.
What I say is actually for beyond this room, because I'm always concerned that we talk to the converts, and it's like, so is the message really going beyond? And so I hope that all the media which are here are really going to make sure that this message goes beyond sort of our little group of people, I think, which we know the message already. But still, I think a number of points need to be made again. So maybe for this change we have been talking about here to happen, and we need a number of things, and I'll list a few items. So first of all, I think we have to change our relation with agriculture, with food, and with nature. They're not there just for us, I mean, we are there for them. We need to nurture. And I think that's first. So if we change this relationship, I think we can move really forward. Also, agriculture is not an industry. Agriculture is actually, we have taken over nature to produce food for us. But the result has been seen already and can be seen every day. So I think we need to think beyond than this. We need to think about ourselves as part of that system and not above and controlling it. And I think that if you think of yourself in that system, you will deal very differently with it than what is done today. So I think that's very important. Nature is not just there to produce our calories or nutrition. It's there to do a whole lot more. And in particular, when we think about agriculture, the culture factor is very important. People in different places have different needs and relationship to nature, and I think this has to be really said. Nature is really sort of the life-supporting system, and that's, I think, if we destroy our ecosystem, destroy the ecosystem services, replace them with business, this clearly cannot be the way forward. And I think that, if you look a bit at sort of the framework of this tribunal, and again for humanity's survival, we need first and foremost to make the case that we don't need any of these products from the industry, as has been said here before, and I made the point already yesterday. And if we don't actually make the point and behave in the way and make our choices that we make these people irrelevant, it will not happen. And I think we have that choice. And I know most of you already made it, but what are people out there? Go out to the street and tell people they ought to buy organic or food out of regenerative agriculture or permaculture, etc. I mean, they're going to look at you like, okay, what are you talking about? It's unfortunately still so. And why? It's because our media are controlled by the same people who want to feed us all these toxic foods. And so again, I think we need to use our media, and I'm so happy to see so many young people in this room and at this meeting, because you know how to deal with the social media. And I think that we're not using this enough, because we're still stuck that the main media are not bringing forward the message which will be put forward, that we need that change.
How long will social media be social media?
Sorry?
How long will social media be social media?
I don't know, but I think it depends on you. I mean, I know if you look at Ethiopia, I mean, it's easy to just turn them off, when you don't like what's going on. But I think that wouldn't happen here. I think people would go to the street and make a lot of noise. But again, still, I think we need to do at least what we can and use our tools which we have. We also still, despite all what we know, despite the evidence we have shown here, we need more good life science, not the dead science which comes out of the industry, because our governments have abdicated their role to assure food security and food safety. They say, well, we don't have any money, let the private sector do this. The result, again, can be seen. It's out there. And I think so again, we need to, as citizens, we have rights to vote. Most of us. Are we doing those? Are we really going? Are we trying to elect leaders, or are we putting ourselves in a position to help? How many people would volunteer to actually go into politics these days? I know not many, unfortunately. But I think that's, of our, let's say, thinking. So I think, we have all these things, but we're not really using them, and we need to, if we want really to make a change. So policies in agriculture, in food system, will not change until we actually force our leaders to make those changes. And one thing which I've been labeled many times, you go to meetings, I'm sure this happens to most of us, you're a bunch of ideologists. Organic, regenerative, name it, biodynamic, that this is an ideology, it's not a science. And I think again, we know it's wrong, we have the evidence, we have good science, but again I think we need to make the point much more strongly, that what we have is solid. And therefore, we need to see how can we even produce more of this good science. I had the privilege to be the co-chair of this famous report, the IASTD report. Reports are called Agriculture at the Crossroads. And even then, 2009, we said we need a change. We need a transformation to agroecology. We said that business as usual is not an option. Guess what? The biggest pushback came from the industry. They tried to demolish a report which was twice peer-reviewed. Twice. That this is not good science. So again, just to show that we have a lot. Unfortunately, even the countries that signed did do little to actually implement any of it. So again, I think this falls back to us, to our group here, to really to push forward and to push aside the industry, which is the main roadblock in this whole system. So agroecology needs to become the global standard for our food production system. And whatever it entails, like the different practices which are in there, I want to mention this whole issue of regeneration. Maybe you could say that regenerative agriculture and food system are even one level above. But I think we need to bring these people together, and the call for people to unite, for people who think in the same direction, to create large global networks, because that's how we're going to really beat the people out there and the forces which are always sort of pushing against what we're trying to do. So, what are the leverage points? Because leverage points are, well, the number we have. We have to use them. And what we need to do also, we need to make sure that we put in place or force our policymakers to develop policies which support this. It will not happen without new policies. And for example, we have now that international universal agreed framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. We don't have to go argue about, oh, do we need another framework? It's there. It's been agreed by everyone. And the several goals, actually all 17 goals, link to the goal 2, which is about food security, hunger. And so it's there. We need to go dig it out and say, our policymakers, yeah, but you signed here. Everyone, every country can go say, you guys signed here. We need to do that. So we don't have to reinvent that one. So but if we don't do that, then, you know, all right, we start at zero again. We don't have time. We're running out of time, as we heard before already. We're going to all fry if we don't take this carbon down into the ground. But I think we need to be ready to pay more for our food. We need true costing. And actually, it won't be that much more if we or buy the sustainably produced food. It will be a whole lot more if you are a junkie using junk food. But that has to change, because if we don't change the pricing, I don't think that we can turn around that system. And for the people who maybe don't have the means today to cover higher food prices, all right, we can find other ways to do that. All the subsidies in the billions are paid every year to the farmers to do the wrong thing. We call these perverse subsidies, could be used to help the poorer people among us actually to afford better food. And actually we need to deal with the goal, I can't remember what number it is, but about inequity. There's a goal there in this SDGs, which deals with inequity. We need to change that. If not, we cannot change the system. So here we are basically with a lot of leverage points which we can activate. But really I think the last point we need to do is also, and in frame of this discussion here, is to make sure that our government bring Monsanto and others to accountability. We will not change. We need to work on several different bases. But because of what's happened already, I think accountability is really very important. And I hope that out of this event here, things will change also on that side. Because on the one hand, we say we don't need them. That will take time to do all this. In the meantime, we want them also to disappear from the scene and be brought to account for their crimes against humanity and also ecocide. Thank you.
I'm a parent. I'm 17 years old, and I'm the founder of an organization called Kids Right to Know from Canada. We work for mandatory GMO labeling and informing kids about the dangers of GMOs and the need to switch from GMO junk food to healthier alternatives, non-GMO and organic. Firstly, I just wanted to say thank you so much to all the organizers. This is such an incredible turnout, and I think this is one of the best gifts our movement could have ever received. So thank you to Vandana Shiva, and everyone who put such hard work. Today is the last day of the tribunal, but this is the first day of the growing even more of our movement. It does not end here today. When I was younger, I'd say about grade 8 or 9, younger, yeah. I'm in grade 12 now, and I didn't really know the definition of an activist. I started my work in grade 6. I was 12 years old, And I thought that it was a very negative thing, because in the news we always hear about the crazy activists burning down cars or turning them over, whatever they report on. And so I looked up the definition, because people were constantly referring to me as an activist. And it said somebody who is so passionate about an issue that they want to take action. And at that exact moment, that word defined me. I knew I was an activist. And I think all of us need to become more of activists in our daily lives. It's crazy to think that we have to go through so much hard work and effort in order to gain back our simple human rights, our right to food. I think that food is a human right. And we're simply fighting for our seed freedom, our right to know what's in our food, protection for our environment, and of course, protecting all life forms. Now, nothing to me is worse than the fact that corporations are going to other countries, convincing farmers, especially those who are suffering from severe poverty, and telling them that these crops are going to be the solution. Even in Canada, we have corporations going into schools and telling kids that GMOs are the answer to feed world hunger. I'm from Canada and I fight for GMO labeling in Canada, but I don't think it's enough to just say I'm Canadian anymore. I'm a global citizen, and I think we all are. We need to work together, united, to make sure that this cause isn't segregated by country or by continent. We are all together in this fight because, after all, Monsanto affects us all in varying levels, but it does affect us all. We are all victims of Monsanto's greed. At the beginning of the year, actually, I had an opportunity to go to the Monsanto shareholder meeting, and I went with Moms Across America. And I obtained proxy from a shareholder in Canada, and I was able to ask CEO Hugh Grant, not the actor, if he would label GMOs, not label, but support or stop spending millions and millions of dollars. And actually, I brought the questions. I can read a little bit from it. I asked, if you truly believe that your GM technology is safe, if you truly believe that it has the potential to feed the world, why are you treating it like a dirty little secret that can't be shown on labels? Why, if it's such a proven, why, if it's such a proven technology, are you fighting it rather than promoting it? And it's a very long question. It's this entire page. So if you want to hear more about it, I can read you the full thing later. I also asked if he would publish his independent, the studies that they perform at Monsanto onto their website for independent researchers to review. And if he would stop fighting against democracy and our right to know and our freedom to choose what we put in our own bodies. After all, we live in a democratic country, Canada, the US, Europe. We all live in democracies, and yet we can't even choose the food that we put in our own bodies. To me, that is such a simple fight, and yet they spend millions and millions of dollars each year trying to stop our movement. But we are unstoppable, because we are waking up, we are rising up, and we are standing up for our future. This is no longer just about our generation or the generation to come. This is about the incredible amount of years and the incredible amount of kids that are yet to come. And we have to fight for them to make sure that they have the future that we all deserve. You know, generations before me never had to deal with their kids growing up eating pesticide and herbicide-laden foods. Their food wasn't tampered with. When my grandmother was growing up, strawberries were just strawberries, corn was just corn. Now, everything has changed. And we have to fight to get back that right for real food. We have to realize the miracle that life is, the miracle that the seed is. And together, as one global unity, we can work together for that goal. My goal for when I'm older is, I don't want to have to grow up, or I don't want other kids to have to grow up in a world where the bees and butterflies are dying. I don't want them to have to endure what we have to endure. Worrying whether the soil and water will be too contaminated to grow safe food or to drink safe water. I don't want them to have to grow up worrying that Monsanto and other corporations are taking over farmers' lands, or are patenting seeds, or owning life. And that's my goal, and I hope everyone has the same goal in mind. And Rupert Stevens once said, always leave the earth better than you found it. That should be all of us working together for that exact quote. That's what I've lived by for the past 17 years. And I think we owe this to ourselves and for the many generations that are yet to come. It's not about us, it's about the future. And we are all one. Let's make this dream come true. Thank you.